This is a special presentation of the Gaming News Canada show with Steve McAllister.
Hello and welcome back to the Gaming News Canada show. As always, I am your host, Steve McAllister. The Canadian Gaming Summit is less than 2 weeks away, and among the speakers on the many panels that will take place during the three-day conference is Stephen Salz, the co-founder and chief executive officer of the Toronto-based sportsbook, esports book, and iGaming business, will participate in a panel on next-gen gamification during the 3 days of the conference. Today, however, we have him back on the Gaming News Canada show for a one-on-one conversation. Stephen, thank you, as always, for making the time to be with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And as I just said off camera before we hit the record button, Stephen, that's far and away the best background we've had on this podcast yet.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, Stephen, last week, the reason why I wanted to get you on for a few reasons, but especially last week, Rivalry announced it was taking an ST plunge. And Stephen, I'm thinking the Rivalry customers will probably have to Google an ST plunge.
Yeah.
But you took that.
That's actually what you were saying. Yeah.
But you guys took the plunge into the land of cryptocurrency by introducing Rivalry Token. Has been mentioned in the coverage around the announcement, moving Rivalry into the crypto gambling market fits quite nicely into your strategy of serving bettors 30 years and younger. I just want to start, like, what's so attractive about crypto? I think it's something for old farts like me. It's a bit intimidating, but and you come from the traditional Canadian banking industry, but kind of what was the journey that led you to last week's announcement?
Yeah, I mean, do you want the long, medium, or short answer? It depends.
Let's let her rip.
Yeah, so I guess so I've personally been in and around crypto since like 2012. I wasn't like heavily invested or anything then, or else I probably wouldn't be doing this interview. I'd be doing something else. But no, I had a friend that was really involved and was mining Bitcoin back in 2012. And then for people that were around then, they'll remember there were all these different services that existed where you could essentially do cloud mining or just offshore essentially mining of Bitcoin that you could just put some money in and you would get some proportional amount, and you were just almost like crowdfunding in a way. And a really popular geography for this at the time, and I actually don't even know if they do it like this anymore because it's just done cheaper elsewhere probably. But at the time, geothermal in Iceland was really popular because it was like cheap energy. So I remember I put some money into like a geothermal Bitcoin farming business in 2012, and but not because I had some vision for where I was going to go, but more just because it was fun and interesting, and I've always just been interested in technology, and it just seemed crazy and like this looks cool. And then fast forward to 2015, 16, I met my co-founders of Rivalry. They were running a business called Loot Market, which was a in-game item marketplace, so you could buy and sell two popular esports in-game aesthetics. They were called skins, so Counter-Strike and Dota. Their marketplace was called Loot Market. One of the, I think it was the largest at one point, the largest transactional currency for people buying and selling and transacting on this in-game item marketplace was Bitcoin back then. So once I started to get involved in that, they themselves individually were more invested in crypto, and their business was utilizing it, and therefore I was now involved in that business. So we just started to get more familiar with it, and then so we were already like really close to it come like 2016, 2017, and then we started going down the path of Rivalry. 2017, put together our application for the Isle of Man, which is our first kind of main international license, and we were not from the gambling industry, right? We were just like consumer tech guys. And we immediately already thought that there was an odd dynamic as a consumer product. Gambling has a very odd dynamic as a consumer product that is unique to any consumer product, different from Loot Market, like the other one we were operating, which was a marketplace. We were just kind of providing a service where I'm sure others exist, but I can't think of another consumer product in the world where the relationship with your customer is essentially like a antagonistic, quasi-combative one where like their loss is your revenue. And therefore building a brand in a business like that is really odd because like how do you create super fandom for a thing where it has that relationship, which is why I think brand building in online gambling is such a hot topic, because I think the root cause issue that makes it such a hot topic is because it's so difficult to do because of this like intrinsic foundational element of online gambling as a consumer product that's really unique. And I feel like nobody says that out loud, but like everyone knows that like the customer has to lose for you to have revenue, for you to generate revenue. It's just it's kind of out in the open. So we knew this then, and we were already kind of tech and brand guys. And we, as part of our application to the Isle of Man, and we were just naive at the time because we didn't think about, I guess, the responsible gambling considerations and other like financial licenses you'd require. But our original application for our license in the Isle of Man was essentially doing gambling as a SaaS business, where it was like a subscription business, because we're like, oh, we don't want people, necessarily picking how much they deposit, and let's make it more casual. We'll just do high volume of people just picking different packages. Like, you're a bronze person, you deposit your credit card or whatever gets dinged $20 a month or $50 or $100. And we also thought that people wouldn't really be withdrawing that much in that case. So we're like, oh, let's also turn your wallet into almost a savings account, and it would have some yield on it. Because we're like, oh, this will take away some of these like alignment issues in gambling. It would be less zero sum. It'd be less us versus you. It's kind of an entertainment product with also like some yielding product on top of it. This was like the actual like original idea. And it was all around solving like alignment and the behavioral challenges within online gambling. It turns out that broke like RG rules, because you can't like forcibly take money out of someone's credit card for them to gamble with it, which now makes a lot of sense. And also like, yeah, we would have needed like financial licenses and all these kind of things to offer like yielding savings products essentially. So all that kind of died. But that was also the time when it was the first cycle for what was called ICOs at the time, which was tokens. Basically, it was the first token cycle in crypto, also just coincidentally in 2017, 2018. And it was completely unproven and untested, the technology. There was also no legal framework for it. So some of the people that introduced tokens then, whether in gambling or not, got into issues with like securities law, all this kind of stuff. We stayed away from it. We didn't really fully understand how it would work. So then go now to like 2000, late last summer, and we've had crypto outside of Ontario. We've had crypto as a deposit withdrawal method already for years on Rivalry. We've already seen the psychographic overlap between our customer and a crypto customer. It's a predominantly an under 30 male that grew up on the internet and is the same type of consumer. So we were already kind of there. And then in the summer, we were looking at different ways of how do we build out more gamification and Rivalry? How do we create more loyalty systems? How do we do the things we always say we want to do? Just make it more intrinsically entertaining, reasons to show up every day that aren't necessarily to wager, all this kind of stuff. And we're like, okay, well, this kind of game economy and Rivalry, we started working with like different third-party people we were talking to, like people that had built literal like video game economies, like at huge scale, like really trying to think super deep about this. And then we're like, okay, if we're going to do something like that, it's going to require a currency of some kind or some unit of value within a Rivalry economy that users would be exchanging for either utility for different services or whatever it may be. And then we started thinking back, we're like, okay, well, what's going on with crypto and tokens? Is there a more robust legal framework? What's the tech looking like now? And we started doing more and more work and getting caught up on things specific to tokens, not crypto, just like specific to what's happening within tokens and token technology. There were more use cases now. It seemed to make a lot more sense. And we thought, okay, well, if we're going to have a unit of value, it'll be a lot more interesting and compelling and potentially great for customer acquisition, great for onboarding our users, also more into crypto, great for reactivating users. Let's do it as a token because it'll have some real money value. It'll be more compelling. It's more exciting than some made up gem or something. It works within the constraints of our business. We want to go after more crypto users, so this will kind of stick a flag up in that universe of people. We also want to onboard in the jurisdictions we can more of our users into crypto because, and I'll answer that original question, it's just like an objectively better way of moving money in and out of services on the internet in every single way. There's no downtime, no maintenance windows. It's instantaneous, no middleman, fees are lower, et cetera. Like the list kind of goes on. So, and it's like ubiquitous globally. You're not doing payment providers on every single country for every single method one by one. You just turn one on and it works everywhere. So that also just fit the ethos of the company. So yeah, that's like the long answer. Then that takes us all the way to here. We do the legal work, structure, see how it makes sense, build out the concept, add a little bit more meat on the bones, and then we announce that this is something that we're looking to do. Yeah, last week.
And are there any hurdles that you would have had to clear with AGCO or iGaming Ontario around this, Stephen?
Yeah, so we spoke to all the regulators. Like, I think that's part of being public, and we're always trying to do things legitimately and bring people along with us, I guess I would say. We don't want to do something that's going to cost us our license, or something more negative in the business. So it was a few different things, and that's honestly what took the longest was the structure work in terms of just like the legal structure for the company at a general level. We're also a public company, so making sure we're not going to, even if you're a private, it'd be the same thing. Like making sure we're not going to break securities law or anything like this. That was also a lot of work. Then we've got multiple licenses. So yeah, we spoke to the GSC, which is the Isle of Man Gambling Commission, and we did speak to AGCO. The announcement phase itself, though, we haven't actually done anything that would break any regs, anyways. As in, the announcement last week was saying, "Hey, we're going to be launching a token later this year. We expect later this year." And also there's a farming phase that's open. So for people that aren't familiar, when you introduce a token into your service or your product, usually you do what's called farming, or you open up a farming phase before the token gets released. And all that is just a way to engage a potential new community, if it's a new product, or your existing community plus new people, in getting involved in different tasks that will eventually lead to them receiving tokens for doing those tasks. So it's a way to start just building critical mass and momentum into eventually releasing the token, because you don't want to release a token to an audience of zero. Like, you want to like build some interest in critical mass. People know what it is. They have an understanding of how it'll work within your product. You start to give them more information as you build it out, etc. So yeah, we announced we're going to do it, and we announced the farming phase. The farming phase, though, is just has nothing. There's nothing crypto about it other than it's tied to the token. It's all this like nuts stuff that we've been talking about a little bit online, where you just connect your crypto wallet to Rivalry, and then you've opted into farming, and then all your activity on Rivalry is tracked, and you earn the pre-token value item, which is NUTZ, lots of different NUTZ over the course of the next couple of months, and then eventually you'll exchange those NUTZ for tokens. But at this phase, I'm saying that because at this phase, like, there's nothing. Although the AGCO and IGO doesn't have a framework for us to offer crypto at all, meaning that the token would not be currently at this point in time will not be available for Ontario regulated product. We haven't done anything at this point that breaks any regs. So like, a user connecting their wallet and getting NUTZ doesn't actually do anything. There's nothing. There's no breach there. But yeah, we've definitely been speaking to them about it. We sent the material, let them know we were going to announce it, all that kind of stuff.
And then what have you had reaction from your customers so far, or from the industry, or?
Yeah, I'd say like it's been, so we've had pretty decent uptick from customers, and we've had a lot of people connect their wallet and want to start farming, because one of the big components of this as well, as just a reactivation campaign in a way, is every single customer that's ever placed a bet on Rivalry in our history. So someone that maybe placed a bet in 2019 and churned has already earned NUTZ, meaning eventually tokens, for that activity. So we're reaching out to everyone that's ever done anything on Rivalry and saying, hey, you don't have to do anything else. Just come back and connect your wallet, and you've already earned this thing that will likely have some kind of value in the future, or have real money value at some point in the future. So we've had a positive response because of that. And then, yeah, it also opened up just a broader conversation on crypto and like crypto's place in online gambling. And I put out a whole kind of piece on LinkedIn with an image of me looking like Derek Zoolander.
Right.
And that that created a different conversation, which is more macro and philosophical in nature, as to like the divide in where the industry is going, and people that are going to adopt this technology, or people that are not.
I just want to ask you, it's interesting. I mean, two years ago, when I think maybe 3 years ago now, I went to the Sigma hosted a conference in Toronto, and there were several panels around Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and we've seen recently the arrest of the crypto king from Whitby, Aiden Matirsky, and as when we started Gaming News Canada back in February 2021, and NFTs were kind of a hot thing back then, and you don't read or hear much about NFTs these days. Like, just for someone who, again, for an old fart like me who doesn't follow crypto closely, who doesn't follow the NFT issue closely, or have one, like what advice would you give, or what would you say about someone who might be a bit nervous about investing in cryptocurrency?
Yeah, well, I think one, it's a lot easier than people think, as in setting up a crypto wallet and starting to get involved in the space. Some of the consumer experiences have gotten so good that you can set up a wallet within quite literally a few seconds, and it's completely secure and works. And it's a really really easy way to start getting involved. Uh, I think like I put this in the LinkedIn piece because it's a good book. There's a book called Read Write, owned by Chris Dixon. He's one of the partners in Andreessen Horowitz, who's one of the obviously largest venture capital firm in the world, and they're one of the largest investors in crypto and, let's say, blockchain technologies. Where the way he described it, and I liked it, is he talked about how people that are involved in the space now get looks from other people where, yeah, they think it's silly or a scam, and because there's not an easy way to wrap your hands around it. And the way that he describes it is there's inside out technologies that arrive nicely packaged, and there's outside in technologies that are messy, mysterious, and disguised as something else. So something that would be inside out would be like the first iPhone when it was released to market, where it was when it was presented on stage, it was a thing that you could immediately grasp. It was super tight. It was a completed product. It was built, inside by Apple and a great kind of R&D process, et cetera. And it was presented as like a completed product. It was like the iPod originally and all that kind of stuff. Crypto, because of what it is intrinsically as a decentralized, let's say, community-driven piece of technology, therefore it is built in that way. It's not going to come to market in a super clean and crisp way that old farts, let's say, as you said, are going to immediately wrap their hands around. And if you think about early computing, like people who know just the history of technology generally, early computing was the same way. It started as homebrew club, and people were just basically hacking around with stuff, and it looked crazy. You should look at some of the original, I think it was like the Apple One or Apple Two or whatever. It's like the clunkiest, craziest looking thing you'll ever see, and because it was total, just completely hacked together, and it was like that spirit of building something fresh in your garage with a community. No suits, all that kind of stuff, and then eventually these things got more neatly packaged and got mass appeal and everything. Obviously, we know at this point. I think that is like the big challenge with crypto is you get a lot of the messiness that's involved in something being built by anybody anywhere, and also you just have like the instantaneous nature of the internet where maybe early computing had a lot of, I wouldn't say the same issues, but maybe early computing had some of the same perhaps challenges to get mainstream adoption and people questioning it. And are people really going to put these machines in their home? And they're so expensive, no one's going to afford them. Like I'm sure there was this kind of narrative, but there wasn't social media and there wasn't this like instantaneous nature of like spinning things around the world in a second where things were maybe given a bit more time to breathe. I think the challenge with crypto is it is this like messy, chaotic, community-driven thing that also people want to talk about constantly and instantly online, which then creates a lot of suspicion as to what's actually happening. But no, there's a huge component of the industry that is quieter because they're really just their heads down and they're building stuff that is building actual and real technology here. And the initial use case being the 24/7 ubiquitous, uncensored, no middleman movement of money around the world is like an incredibly effective piece of technology. So like that's kind of the thing I talked about in my piece was as a gambling provider or gambling operator, especially if you operate in, let's say, gray markets, the country by country solutioning of payment providers is super challenging. And even within regulated markets, to be clear, like there are, and I think I've spoken to IGO and AGCO about this. There are unregulated operators in Ontario, as we all know. There's a ton of them, and many of them do leverage crypto. And again, I don't want people to think that makes crypto an inherently bad thing. It's just core to the technology. It just happens to be used in this way to access markets that are regulated. But getting your money into a offshore, unregulated, like unlicensed Ontario crypto operator is much, much faster than using like Interact on a regulated operator. It's much faster. Also, it credits instantly. It's never down. There's never issues. So like that's the thing, right? Like that's like how gaming operators think about it. Like the offshore guys without a license are leveraging crypto, are offering a superior, faster, more instant gratification payment option for you to get into the experience of gambling than what's possible by the regulated operators.
And still reliable, right? Like there's not fear of losing that money or right.
No. It's actually more robust than these fiat methods that have the potential for human intervention or human error, or are systems that are not nearly as, let's say, secure or robust as, you know, a global Ethereum or Bitcoin network or whatever it may be. Yeah, so that's what I've been kind of posing about this is if you want to just forget and not have a broad philosophical conversation about crypto, if you just look at it as a solution, as a payment solution, just think of it as a payment service provider. It's the best payment service provider you can possibly have if you're running a business on the internet.
Anyone who's heard you on this show over the 3 years, or reads your LinkedIn posts or reads you on Twitter, I mean, it's very, very clear who your audience is at Rivalry. It's young people, and again, I would think that a product like Rivalry Launch is attractive to your customer base, because I think the kids isn't the right word, but young people are quite open to trying new things, and they're in a much different headspace than someone of my vintage.
Yeah, and also think about the fact that, myself included, like, grew up on the internet where your gamer tag or your pseudonym on a social media profile is as real to you as your physical world identity. So this technology also, and yes, you do have to KYC to get into Rivalry and all that kind of stuff, but in some cases, on some operators, you don't necessarily. It does offer an experience that feels more continuous with the way that they grew up on the internet than going into an operator that doesn't have or that doesn't leverage crypto in any way or have an understanding of it. So it just fits into their world naturally. Whereas, using their bank account to do an e-transfer for a product on the internet doesn't feel as consistent. Yeah.
Right. Hey, I want to talk to you. It's been a while since we've spoken, Stephen, and I think we're in month 26 now of regulated gaming in Ontario, and love to get your thoughts just on the continued evolution of the market here, of kind of the opportunities, the wins, the losses, and the challenges moving forward.
Yeah, it feels like it's kind of settled in a little bit. It's not as much as this race where everyone is trying to oust each other on the best offer, welcome offer, all that kind of stuff. It feels like that's gone a little quieter. The marketing doesn't seem as in your face and everywhere. Maybe I'm just not seeing it, but it's not everywhere, or we're just used to it. But I'm not seeing it in the same way. I guess I don't really have much to say, because it feels somewhat stable. I think our usual thing that we're barking about when we talk to operators is more how to contend with the segment of the market that is still utilizing offshore operators. And yes, like we operate in gray markets globally ourselves, but we obviously don't operate offshore in regulated markets. But many people do. So I think that's more the topic that's been interesting for us. I don't really have anything super juicy or exciting to add to the market. It just feels like it's kind of settled in. I would say, like, it's not mature, but there's none of the antics of the early days, and we're not really seeing anything super new or exciting. I think everyone's just kind of nestling into their market share. That's what it feels like, to be honest.
Yeah, it feels like on the advertising side, there has been a shift to promoting online gaming and kind of getting away from just being all in on sports betting. And I think,
when you look at the numbers, right, like casino is massive here. So yeah.
Yeah, and again, with relation to the offshore operators, there was a lot of buzz in the U.S. last week, where in Michigan, the gaming commission there shut down Bovada, and I guess you do wonder. There are companies out there that are still advertising. Do you see? Is there a push on the AGCO and IGO at all to shut down these offshore operators, or is it just a lot more complicated to do?
It's not that easy. I think this was a big subject of the piece I put on LinkedIn was that used to be easier maybe 5 to 10 years ago, and it's just not really possible on the internet now. So even though, as you're saying, oh, they shut down Bovada, I kind of like, I was cringing or laughing a little bit, because it's just like, it doesn't actually mean anything really. So I think, and if you're in Ontario, anyone who goes to a news site or these sites that have a lot of paid media on them, how over 50% of the time it's a offshore operator promoting bonuses and paid media in Ontario, whereas the onshore operators that are licensed and doing all the, let's say, the right regulated things, aren't able to provide any incentive in any of their promotions. So yeah, like when I'm the internet that I live on in Ontario, in terms of just like social media I'm on or the websites that I go across, I'm much more often on the receiving end of incentives and bonus driven promotion from unlicensed operators than I am from ads from regulated operators personally in Ontario, right? And yeah, what I talked about in that piece was, and that's a lot of why we're also doing this, is like, we've always, Rivalry wants to be on the internet of 2024 and beyond. So if you look at what was happening in the space 5 years ago, was possible. 10 years ago was definitely possible, but you could go after the individuals behind an operator. We all know the stuff that happened with Bodog in the US. The guy had to pay a huge fine and all this kind of stuff. Like, you knew who these people were. It wasn't easy to run a business online anonymously. For a long time now, there's been technology where you can run a website or anything you want online, any commerce business online anonymously. It's completely possible now. You used to be able to shut down the domains. You can't really do that, because a lot of what happened with Pirate Bay and these torrent sites is they were dealing with that more than anybody. And then a lot of, again, like, need kind of, our market demand breeds innovation. So people still wanted to access these sites, and they crafted ways to always leave a site up, which is super possible now. Again, you can't really FBI blue screen a website anymore, which we used to see back in the day on the internet. You can't really do that anymore, right? It's just not possible. So you can't push these operators out of your country by doing something to their domain. And then the other one was payments. And again, like, crypto did solve that. It wasn't designed. Crypto was not designed to solve offshore online gambling. It just so happens to be one of the use cases, along with many other on the internet, which is what I want to be clear about. And it not only solved that, as in, if you couldn't do those first two things, you would shut down the movement of money for these offshore operators, which was relatively easy to do and was probably the best hammer that governments or entities had. And now you can't do that either, right? And not only can you not do that, the crypto payment method is more effective than the payment methods that the regulated market has access to. It's also better. It's also like a better consumer experience. So it won everything in that regard. So I think what I pitched in that is, I think that the regulators over time are going to have to see themselves as, like, countries soliciting, the way countries solicit investment. They say, we got nice neighborhoods. It's a great place to start a family. Schools are good. Healthcare is good. There's, it's well policed, and we're super open minded and all this kind of stuff. And you want to create advantages for the people that choose to get the license, because the reality is now, and I'm just saying the truth, is technology enables the ability to operate businesses like this among many, where you don't require the permission of anybody anymore. You just don't. And the consumer experience is better. So customers are going to go, at the end of the day, customers are going to go where they get the best product. So I think that regulators are going to have to think about that at some point over time, as this younger generation becomes an increasing percentage of the overall user base. This isn't like an immediate threat tomorrow, but it's just going to be over time on a long-term horizon. And they need to think about it that way, where it creates so many advantages, like getting the license creates so much like competitive asymmetry, because you're so heavily supported within the market that you're actively trying to take customers from, that you'd be silly not to get the license. That's not the current mentality though, right? So that's, right. Yeah.
Right. Hey, you guys, you had a busy week last week. Not only did you announce the token launch, but your latest financials came out, and
yep.
As always, there's it's a good news, bad news tale. I'll start on the positive side, and that's record revenue margin for the company. I think quarter over quarter, and also an increase in player spending. Just some quick comments on the latest quarter.
Yeah, I think we were, as we said in the release, we definitely stalled out a little bit in the back half of the year. We we were pulling back on marketing spend. We were really trying to manage our balance sheet. That did have a negative impact on like the overall growth profile. Last year was still good. Like we were still up 70, 80% on every metric. So on a year-over-year basis, on a full year basis, if you take out the quarterly gyrations, we were pretty happy with the result on a full year basis, but definitely started to slow down versus our usual pace toward the end of the year, which we weren't super happy about. And then we brought in a little bit of capital towards the end of last year. We were able to go back on the offensive. Turning that back on isn't just flipping a light switch. So we started to spool up things strategically that made sense from a spend perspective, not just going full bore. And then that allowed us to deliver sequential growth everywhere. So all the numbers on a trailing 1, 2, even 3-quarter basis were up. But yeah, the one negative definitely in the quarters, we had to move out our profit guidance from expecting to potentially hit that in the first half of this year to now moving it to full year, which we just wanted the buffer. I think we feel we're getting there, but it wasn't going to hit the original guidance. So that obviously was disappointing for us, but we feel extremely confident on the full year guidance, and it gives us the space to do it.
And then where does Ontario fit in that, Stephen? Like just a quick summation of how Ontario performed in Q1.
Yeah, Ontario was pretty good. I think that as part of our profit focus, we've continued to focus on profit centers, which ultimately are not as strong at this point for us in our regulated markets, being Ontario and Australia. So we talked about this on some of our earnings calls and given commentary like this. We haven't pulled back spend in Ontario. We put on Launders Land, and we did this large kind of in-person esports event that we held, and we are doing marketing in Ontario. But I do think that we've had to, as a function of, again, that like pull back and spend toward the back half of last year, to start to be a little more careful with the balance sheet. When you do that, you have to pick the spots then that are the most profitable are the ones that make the cut, right? So regulated markets are just a little bit more challenging in that regard than some of the gray markets that we're in. So ultimately, the let's say Australia and Ontario wasn't getting the same love that some of the other ones were. So we're still here. We renewed our license, and we're happy to be here. We're going to start pushing harder again in Ontario. But yeah, Ontario for us has been somewhat stable and steady state for the last few quarters as a result of that.
Yeah. Are you surprised that there hasn't been, I think as soon as this market launched, everybody was immediately talking about consolidation, and the small fish would get swallowed by the big fish, and we'd see operators withdraw. And in fact, I think we've had at least one, if not two, new operators join the market since April, since the 2-year anniversary.
Yeah. Well, I think Ontario, I don't know the exact where it ranks, but Ontario from a revenue perspective and where the trajectory is. I saw this in the recent Penn report, because Penn has a pretty good view given the score here and then the stuff they do in the US.
Right.
I think they're projecting Ontario, it would be the equivalent of like of a top 3 state. Like if you were to include Ontario within the size of the regulated US states, their projection is it's going to be amongst the top, maybe the top. I could be like misreading that, but it is pretty juicy still for people that think North America is interesting from a regulated perspective. So I think that's why it's pulling people in. It's also really casino driven, which works for a lot of operators. To an extent, it's easier to walk in and spool up a casino strategy than it is to try to stand up and win on sportsbook. So I think that makes people believe that there's more opportunity here than there are potentially in other places. And I will give IGO and AGCO and the whole regulatory environment credit. So long as you're a legitimate company, it's quite possible to get the license in a reasonably fair timeline. And although for a company Rivalry size, the cost isn't ideal, and we would like to see some changes there based on the size of your operation in Ontario for sure. I will say that if you're a larger operator, the regulatory costs pale in comparison to trying to go do something in the US. So if you're looking at North America, like this is probably the one that makes the most logical sense financially in most regards, which is probably why people are still coming here.
There's a lot of talk right now across the industry here about Alberta and kind of the path to regulatory marketplace moving forward. Where does Rivalry sit on that?
I don't know if we would go there personally, but we've been hearing about Alberta since Ontario regulated, and It's possible, obviously, but yeah, not something. I don't think it would be on our roadmap if it were to regulate. Yeah.
Do you see Rivalry going to another Canadian province like British Columbia or Quebec at some point if they go down the path of regulation?
Quebec is maybe more interesting, and we know
Right.
that because we currently know that, call it gray market casino business in Quebec is huge, huge. Definitely second only to Ontario, obviously, in Canada, and we know there are many operators that do really really well there. So Quebec might be more interesting for sure. Again, if you have a casino strategy, which I think is something that we've been doing a little bit more of, obviously with a lot of our recent product releases and things that we're prioritizing. So that's maybe the only one that comes to mind in Canada that would be interesting. But it doesn't seem like Quebec's going to be doing that anytime soon, or that's not the feeling I get at all. Yeah.
Right. Last question, Stephen. You're kind of the resident esports expert for the Gaming News Canada show. So, whenever we have you on, I just like to get your thoughts on what's going on in esports right now, and where you are with the calendar, the competition calendar for the years. And you mentioned the Launders events earlier,
Yeah.
but just what's the esports landscape look like these days?
Yeah, viewership continues to go up. So like people continue to want to watch it. The average age of the audience, I suspect, is also going up because it just has been the natural course of it for quite some time. Counter-Strike, which is one of the foundational esports, top three, I mean, top two, it's either that or League of Legends are the two most viewed and kind of engaged esports. And Counter-Strike is one of the most gambled on esports. I think it might be number one potentially, but it definitely between that and League of Legends. They recently, as in late last year, had the release of Counter-Strike 2. So it was like a new version of the game that came out. And that brought back a huge audience and a bunch of new people. And then therefore the competitive events for Counter-Strike are now played in Counter-Strike 2. And we've definitely seen a surge of viewership as a result of that and new different types of bettors that are coming into the fold. So yeah, the calendar is looking pretty good. We're feeling still super optimistic about esports. Again, for Rivalry, esports has always been a top of funnel to a specific type of customer, but that customer then comes and plays casino, bets on sports, etc. We continue to leverage it that way. And I'd say specific to Ontario, it's still in like the nascent phase where it needs to mature. Like the numbers came out from IGO, where I think it broke down the categories of percentage of handle. And I'm pretty sure esports was like 1 or 2% of total sports wagers in Ontario last year. And sports betting was 18% of the total. And the other, the remaining 82% was casino. So, if you're looking at that and you're thinking to yourself, like, I think people would look at that and think that esports doesn't make sense in Ontario. But again, it goes back to the original concept that although that may be 1 to 2% of wagers of the 18%, which is quite small, if you look at the percentage of a specific demographic that is though following and engaging with that content and using it as an access point to speak to them, and then they may or may not come in and bet on that, but they may spin slots, or they may play table games, or they may bet on the Blue Jays or UFC or whatever it may be, that's still functional. So I think this is still a thing that is like not understood by the industry at this point, which is okay for us because it lets us to continue to do it. But we remain like equally optimistic and excited about esports. It's been like the core piece of our DNA for a very long time, and no real changes for us. I'm only mentioning the Ontario thing because we did have a few conversations around the numbers coming out, and people may be surprised by how small of a percentage it was, which I think again doesn't tell the story of what's actually happening there from a demographic perspective within the context of the number.
I was going to ask you about marketing spend and that, and obviously Rivalry invested in its own online casino product. I guess over about a year ago ago now. And but to your point, I mean, esports is in Rivalry's DNA, and I can't imagine there's a day where you just walk away from that.
No, I will say, like, obviously as part of the crypto initiative and the language we've used there, we definitely are finding, just for the growth of the business, going after higher value players where crypto wallets on average are higher value than, let's say, the average esports wallet, which again is not like the esports wallet betting on esports, but the user that comes in through esports as an acquisition method. So, and it's interesting because they're similar demo, right? But the person that is engaged more in like the crypto universe has a little bit more disposable spend. Also, psychographically is a little more inclined towards gambling, I would say. So we're excited about that as like a growth avenue for the company, but we won't abandon esports or the gaming community or the things we've done really well for years. But we don't want it to define who the company is. And I think even though we've been talking for years about the concept of esports, what it actually means for Rivalry, the fact that 50% of our business today is casino wagers, people still kind of pin esports on us, which is fine. But we do want it to be clear that we're going to move in whatever way dynamically we have to win, and among a demographic that our brand and our business makes sense in. As in, like, are we going to wake up tomorrow and think that our brand tone and the look of our product is going to acquire 45-plus-year-old slots players? Probably not. But will we move adjacent or to bordering communities to the things we've always done to find growth where the brand makes sense and neighbors that understand what we're doing within a similar or really close demographic? Yeah, absolutely. We're not gonna be stubborn for just to make a point. Yeah.
Hey, I'm sorry, Steve. The final question, and that's because we do have a lot of sports fans that listen to this podcast. That the Edmonton Oilers getting to the Stanley Cup final, and I get asked this question when I appear on radio shows and that. I mean, does having a Canadian NHL team in the Stanley Cup final, is there an Oilers bump for Rivalry's business?
Probably a little bit, not the same as it would be for anybody else. And yeah, and I'm not even going to say it because it's going to be bad for my reputation. What I was going to say, but yeah, I probably a little bit. I mean, I'll just say, like, I didn't even know the Oilers made it to the Stanley Cup final. So you just said that is what I was going to say. Yeah.
Let's end it. Let's end it on that note. Stephen Salz is the co-founder and CEO of Rivalry. Stephen, always appreciate your time. And for anyone that wants to purchase the backdrop for Stephen this morning, you'll have to talk to Stephen, the agent for his children. So you'll have to negotiate that with Stephen. And seriously, Stephen, always appreciate your perspective, and look forward to seeing you at the Canadian Gaming Summit in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Likewise. Thanks, Steve.
Hey, that's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada show. Thanks again to Stephen Salz. We also want to thank the communications guru of Rivalry, Cody Luongo, for putting this interview together. As always, you can find this podcast at gamingnewscanada.ca and on the various podcast platforms. And we look forward to seeing everybody again real soon.
Thank you for listening to the Gaming News Canada show. Sign up for our newsletter at gamingnewscanada.ca. Follow Steve McAllister on LinkedIn. Message Steve if you're interested in being a sponsor or featured guest.